let's bring David Davis into the conversation. He's the Conservative MP for Halton, Price and Howden. He's a former Cabinet Minister. You're giggling away at the fact that I've got this guest on who's been referred to prevent for questioning trans ideology. We'll get on to that later. First of all, lovely to see you this morning, David. Thank you for your time, as ever. Can we discuss this bid by the UAE to take control of the Telegraph? What's your reaction to it?
Well, I wrote to the Secretary of State some time ago, asking her to do what she's actually done, which is to call it in to, I think it's called a public interest notification, because I just think it's wrong. I mean, we shouldn't normally, in my view, allow people who are outside the reach of our country to own major newspapers. The Telegraph is one of the most important newspapers in the country. It has massive influence both at elections, in people's general view, and indeed when there are Tory party leadership contests, as may happen in the next few years, then they have a massive influence there too. Why should we give that power to the Emirates, in this case, Vice President of the Emirates, a country which in the past has not exactly treated press freedom with any sort of respect. It's done the opposite. I think you pointed out in your articles that its attitude to women as well. So there are all sorts of areas where it clashes with what I would think of as the national interest.
I'm going to read a point from them in just a moment with regard to them sort of denying that they would suppress freedom of the press. But before I do, Ofcom will obviously investigate this, but it's for the government, ultimately, Lucy Fraser and I guess Rishi Sunak, to stop it. Should the government stop it, basically? David, is the straight question I'm asking you.
Yes, in my view, absolutely. And the other argument I'll give you is this. Some time ago, we allowed Rupert Murdoch to buy the Times, right, and the Sunday Times. And at that time, there were conditions put upon it. And those conditions were broken, and there was nothing we could do about it. I mean, we were told that the editor of the Times would be independent. Eventually, one of them got sacked, and we could do nothing about it. And the same would apply with the Emirates, frankly. Okay. We could do nothing to protect it.
Let me just read this statement from Redbird IMI. Any transfer of ownership will, of course, be subject to regulatory review, and we will continue to cooperate fully with the government and the regulator. Redbird IMI are entirely committed to maintaining the existing editorial team of The Telegraph and Spectator publications and believe that editorial independence for these titles is essential to protecting their reputation and credibility. We should also point out that Paul Marshall, one of the people bidding for the title, is a major investor in GB News. Let's move on to the next story as we're thinking about Gulf states.
Before you do, just one point there. Originally they were just going to lend them the money. Yeah. And then they made it a convertible, and it's going to be converted. That, in other words, they're going to take equity. They are going to take control. So if ever you get them on your program, do ask them, if they really mean what they say, why are they taking control?
Yeah, OK, noted. Thank you, David. Let's move on to other matters, albeit Gulf-related. COP28, is it just a load of hot air? I was surprised to see Rishi Sunak, Lord Cameron and indeed the King all fly there in separate private jets.
Well, I'm not going to get into their private...
well, come on. I mean, it just makes a mockery of it, doesn't it?
I don't think any of the people involved in green politics at the top level are particularly careful about the way they use private jets, and that's whether it's prime ministers, kings, or indeed actors and actresses who want to make some sort of coverage out of it. So what was good about it was there was some of the countries, at least a significant number, are now seeming to take nuclear power seriously. I mean, it's one of the few routes that actually gives us some chance of defeating this problem. We're also seeing the British government doing more about dealing with the consequences. I've long thought that our attempts to deal with the increase in temperature are likely to fail. I mean, for all sorts of reasons, scientific and political. But actually dealing with the floods, dealing with the poverty, dealing with those things is a direct way we can do something about it with a decent chance of success. Yes. This time, for the first time, we actually seem to be engaged on that. So actually, I approve of that. I think, despite the fact it's in the Middle East, which is an odd place to have, a climate conference. Nevertheless, given mostly oil and gas comes from that, the simple truth is they are at last focusing on things that matter. Just as, to be honest, Rishi's recent commentary on and decisions on green matters, which was taken as denying net zero. No, it's not. It's making net zero achievable for ordinary people.
Yes.
We aren't all billionaires. We can't all afford vast sums of money. And he's actually doing something towards that end. So I actually think it's been quite a good couple of months for the green agenda.
David, just a quick word on the King's tie. He's wearing Greek flags on his tie during a row over the Elgin Marbles. Is he being too political there, briefly?
I think he's been spectacularly unwise.
Right.
The truth is the king has obviously got views on many things. We know that. But the truth is, being king, you have to curb those views. You have the option of making your views known to the Prime Minister once a week personally. That's something nobody else has.
Yeah.
You don't need to start flashing ties or other views or whilst you're doing it. It's an abuse of the position, I'm afraid, and you shouldn't be doing it.
David, I've got 90 seconds left with you, and I need to ask you, as Shadow Home Secretary, about some of these shambolic, former Shadow Home Secretary, I should add. Some of these I promoted you to the other side. It's not that bad for the Tories, surely. But briefly, we've seen this shambolic display by the head of the Home Office saying they don't know where 17,000 asylum seekers are who have withdrawn their applications. Lee Anderson also questioned them. They didn't have any of the figures. Is the Home Office fit for purpose, David?
Well, many years ago, John Reid said no.
Yeah.
And at the time, I didn't really agree with him because actually there was somebody there, the Perm Sec there was really very good. But when I've spoken to past Permanent Secretaries, they all agree that the Conservative ministers have actually been let down by their civil servants. It's not just this. Remember before we had this issue of only 1.5 asylum seekers a week being dealt with by the caseworkers. Again, that's a civil service failure. There's a whole series of indicators, I'm afraid, that says to me that the Home Office needs some pretty sizable reform at the staff level. Making people turn up to work, making people do their job properly, making people deliver, making people know their job. You don't turn up. As a minister, I would never have turned up to a select committee not knowing the answers to the obvious questions. And heavens above, this was an obvious question.
Yeah, wasn't it just? Very, very, very quick word, finally, on Boris at the COVID inquiry next week. Will you be watching it with your popcorn at the ready, David?
I'll be watching extracts of it. I'm afraid I view this as the most expensive reality TV show on television. £100 million to hear a King's Counsellor show off. Frankly, I said back in 2021 we need 2 inquiries, a scientific one to find out what the proper answer was, and then when we've done that, we can say who's to blame. What we're doing at the moment is nothing more than the sort of Dominic Cummings, Boris Johnson
blame game, David.
Show. We don't want that. We don't want that.
David Davis, you're on fiery form this morning, always in good fettle. Lovely to speak to you. Thank you very, very much for joining me.